My oh my, does this Dirty John story pick up in Lila Shapiro's article in the New York Magazine titled "The Man Who Gossiped Too Much." When we last were talking about this, they recovered from finding out that he was married. He faked divorce papers. John Nelson, aka Enty Lawyer of Crazy Days and Nights, he faked divorce papers to his girlfriend Cassandra, told them that he was going to move her from Florida to California, and he was flying out there to drive her and her 3 kids, 2 special needs kids that got pulled out of school, said goodbye parties. He was going to drive them to California so they could start their life out together. But here's where things get crazy. What happens 22 minutes later, as Lila describes, after he texted her, "I love you," and he had gotten off the plane to take her to California, there was a knock on Cross's door. An officer from the sheriff's department handed her a restraining order. At the park in the desert, Nelson invited me to imagine that I had done something embarrassing when I was younger. Let's say when you were 18, you decided you were going to make sporn or something like that. Maybe you make 3 or 4 of them and then you forget about it. You go to college, you have a life, you have a really good career, but one day somebody would possibly find out about this, or it will ruin your reputation, and then you get together with somebody and you think, oh well, I can trust them or whatever, and you tell them your story. Then a few weeks later you go, really, I don't want to be with this person, and the first thing they do is say, well, if you're not with me, I'm going to tell the whole world your secrets. That had been his life for the past year, he said. From January 15, 2023 until now, every single time I wouldn't call her back, she would say, I'm going to blow up your world. Nelson said that he had been feeling stressed and vulnerable when first visiting Cross. Jenkins, the socialite he'd falsely accused of running an international ring, had recently sued him, and he wanted someone he could confide in. He had turned to Cross in part because she was one of the few people who knew who he was. She was also an attractive person who knew what to say and was good at podcasting. That is true, he told me. And then she roped him in with a story about her abusive ex and asked for his advice in case the guy had ever tried to take her children away. He said he wouldn't have necessarily returned for a second visit if not for the fact that his wife found a Polaroid of him and Cross in his luggage. They fought, leaving Nelson with no place to go. When he and Cross suggest the possibility that he returned to Florida, he thought, that's not a bad idea. I'm pretty easily convinced, one of his ex-wives told me later, that Nelson was extremely passive and completely anti-confrontational. The ex, who asked not to be named, said her marriage with Nelson ended shortly after she discovered he was cheating on her. Nelson said that wasn't how he remembered it. Had she not left, she said, I think he would have stayed married to me until he died. It was on his second trip to Florida that Nelson began to feel he had made a mistake. He was taken aback when he realized Cross had told her friends and family that he was Enty. My mom didn't know, he said. For 2 decades, perhaps just 20 people knew what he did for work. Now that number had grown closer to 30. That really freaked me out, he said. He told me he barely remembered the 3.5-week trip around Christmas. He was in a fog, he said. Things got weird. He said she was constantly asking him to do chores and help out with the children. Not exactly the fun thing he imagined. I had assumed the father mantle or whatever when I just met her literally for the first time a couple of weeks ago. When he told Cross he had missed his kids and wanted to go home, she said she had already made dinner plans with her mother and needed him to watch her kids. That night, he felt Cross was keeping him as a prisoner. Nelson showed me a selection of texts Cross sent him over the course of a year. In April, she wrote to him, "If you don't effing call me back right now and apologize and have an actual adult conversation like I'm a human being and not a piece of abuse trash that you can just use and throw away, I swear to effing God, I will literally show the entire world who you are."